Hi guys, we just came back from Germany and from the Galacon, and we thought that you might be interested by the panel we gave there. So we made a video out of it, and I hope you like it. So, what's on the menu for this video? First, Blue Note will say a few words about different types of composers or artists. Then, we'll focus on the process of composing. How to find inspiration, how to find a melody, and finally how to harmonize it. If after this you have any question, feel free to ask in the comment section and we'll happily answer it.
So, from my point of view, there is two types of artists, analytical and intuitive. What does that mean? It means that analytical people tend to rely more on theory and rules of music, whereas intuitive ones do things as they go. If you ask them how they did it, they cannot explain it. Stay aware that there is no defined line between the two. No one purely relies on theory or on their creative side. It's more like a spectrum where you're more on one side than the other. So, what's the point of saying this? While I see a lot of people that stay in their comfort zone and don't improve much, my advice would be, learn your weaknesses and make sure they don't stay that way. You see, I myself am a very intuitive person, and over the course of this year, I focused on learning musical theory. I still rely a lot on my creative side, but now this added knowledge helps me a lot improving my compositions. Now that this is said, we're going to go straight onto the subject, the composition. Before opening your favourite music software, try to think about the ambience you're going to make. Knowing what you want to achieve in your composition, try to make a picture of what you want to represent. Are you going to make something about some forest, snowy mountain, or centered on a character? This can be anything, the limits are your imagination. This part is really important for your choices of melodies, instruments, and having a direction for your music. Every story has a beginning, a twist, turns, and an ending. What is the story you're going to tell? Now that we know what we're going to do with our music, let's talk about ways to get inspiration. Every artist has their own. Some like to go out and admire landscapes, some like to read a book, and some like to inspire themselves with artwork. Here, I'll talk about my own method. If you don't like it, you can always make your own. So, what I do is that I make a small playlist of music that are similar with the ambience of my future composition and analyse how those artists achieve what I want to aim for. Don't be afraid to take inspirations of artists you like. Just be sure to always add your little touch. Be open-minded. There is stuff to learn out of all genres. As long as the music is well made, you will always find something to learn. In the past, I was doing only electronic music. Now I moved on to something else. But I don't put this part of my experience aside. On the contrary, I often apply some stuff I learned with electronic music, even if the two genres are different.
Let's imagine that you're me, and you want to compose a song for the panel you have at the Galacon in 4 days. You need to find inspiration. And for this, I decided to search Symphonies on Google and take the 17th image as a subject. Yeah, because why not? So Princess Cadence came out of this, and I imagined a scenario where she would commission us to make a song for her entrance at the Grand Galloping Gala. This implies that I need to search for musical references. Therefore, I selected a few pieces that were composed for or about princesses. 4 pieces came out of this. This is the aria, composed by Daniel Ingram directly about Princess Cadence. The main theme of the animation movie Princess Mononoke, composed by Joe Hisaishi. A piece composed by John Williams in the honor of a Japanese princess. And finally, the Princess Zelda theme. This the aria was composed to show the opposition between Queen Chrysalis and Princess Cadence. But for now, we'll just listen to the Princess Cadence part. The first thing noticeable is the use of high percussions to support the piano at different moments. And here is an example.
The kind of day of which I dreamed since I was small.
This kind of soft percussion tally with the idea of a princess, gentle, soft, and sometimes authoritarian, which is associated with the shortness of the notes here. Then there is the brass, that plays short notes here too, in the same way they would be played to introduce a king somewhere. For example, here.
Escape before it's too late, find a way to save the day. Hope I'll be lying if I say.
Finally, the string pads are here to bring a sad side to the music, which in this case was important to show Princess Cadence's distress. Let's now jump to the next piece, the Princess Mononoke main theme. In this theme, composed by Joe Hisaishi, absolutely wonderful theme by the way, the instruments are used in a very different way. For example, we still have the string pads, but now instead of expressing a sad tone, they are here to bring a more epic side to the music, especially at this moment. Another interesting thing that is used in this music is the woodwinds. For example, with this solo oboe. This is not entirely related to the princess-ship of the piece, but I thought it might be interesting to note. The oboe is used to make the listener feel the forest aspect of the music. In the same way, Prokofiev used oboes, bassoons and other woodwinds in Pierre et le Loup. Finally, you can hear different moments, horn interventions. They are usually used in pieces about war or to show the majesty of a character, for example in The Lord of the Rings. Overall, in this whole piece you can hear duality between more adventurous parts, with horns, strings and nearly all the instruments of the orchestra, and what I call the dignity part, with woodwinds, strings, only soft instruments. These parts are showing the fact that San is some kind of forest princess, and she's in harmony with nature, like a cute Fluttershy. The next piece was composed by John Williams, and to be honest, I don't really like this piece, which sounds a bit too busy to me. But this is not important when you're looking for references. You need to find pieces that fit with the objective, and whether you like the piece or not, you might find something interesting in it. So, this piece was composed by John Williams and for a Japanese princess. Enjoy! You might have noticed that the high percussions are here once again, and so are the brass. What changes here from the two other pieces is that there's a lot of percussion everywhere. These percussions are here to celebrate the princess. The last reference piece I used is the Princess Zelda theme. This theme is really different from the three others, very quiet, calm and relaxing. There is only a sort of electronic flute, discrete string pads and a harp. The flute refers to Link and his ocarina, but it can also be considered as a representation of the wind in Hyrule while Link travels in it. The string pads are here to bring the harmony and the majesty of the princess. Finally, the harp is here to emphasize the fact that this music was composed for a princess, since it's considered to be a noble instrument often played by princesses, like in the Aristocrat. And this might have been caused by the fact that Marie Antoinette played the harp a lot.
What he just did is a good example of a simple exercise you can apply to your everyday life. Whenever you listen to music on the radio, at home or anywhere, question yourself. How does this melody fit the music? What effects were used to set up the ambience? Why use this instrument here? There are tons of things you can ask yourself. If you apply that to your everyday life, you'll start hearing music differently, and you'll see that you're doing it without even noticing. This exercise will help improve a lot to your ear. You can do a similar exercise by getting your favorite VST and exploring its presets. A lot of them were made by professionals, so try to understand how they did it, what effects, synths or samples they used. It will help you a lot mastering your VSTs. Speaking of mastering VSTs, don't make the same mistake I did when I was beginning as a musician. Don't have too many. Instead, try to focus on mastering 2 or 3 VSTs you like. Every virtual instrument has its own purpose. Test some of them and make your own list. For example, I use East-West Composer Cloud, which is very good for orchestral music. It has tons of instruments and they are really malleable. Omnisphere for my electronic stuff, since it's very easy to use but still has tons of possibilities, and because it's very user-friendly. Lastly, I use Serum for electronic stuff too, but it is more detailed than Omnisphere, so I use it when I have a precise idea of what I want and I can't do it in the other one.
I personally only use East West for the moment, since I nearly only compose orchestral music and it's great for this. They have this subscription model that allows you to pay $29 per month to get an access to all their instruments, and this is really cheap for VST. But Princess Cadence is waiting for her piece, and let's not make her wait too much. Let's get back to the composition of this piece. This is the method I used when I started composing to find melodies, and I still use it a lot. For this, you only need a voice recorder, or the one included in your smartphone. Then take 15 to 30 minutes and while thinking about your goal and the references, sing everything that comes into your mind. Record everything and do not judge. It's not like it's gonna be played in front of an audience at a PonyCon or on YouTube, is it? Well, here are 3 samples of the recording I did to compose the Princess Cadence piece. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Dum 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 da da bum ba da da. Bum bum ba dum bum ba dum bum ba da ba da da bum. I'm not completely happy with this. Let's listen to another one. Oh yeah, that's much better. I'll keep this one. Now what you need to do is go on your favorite score writing software, for example Sibelius, which is a professional one used by many movie composers, or MuseScore, which is its open source alternative. Or if you're not really familiar with scores, you can use any DAW such as Ableton, Cubase, Fruity Loops, or even LMMS, which is their open source alternative. You can either enter the notes directly or use a MIDI keyboard. I suggest the second possibility because it will sound a lot more human. So here is the melody played on the piano over my voice. I'm not completely happy with this raw version, and if you feel the same, you can remove or add notes in your melody. At this point, it's easy, since you already have something to work on. Here is the new version.
Another exercise, and in my opinion the most important, improvisation. You can try improvising alone or with a friend, on the computer or with an instrument. When improvising, try imagining melodies before actually playing them. Don't just do random notes on the scale. Practicing improvisation at least once a day will help you a lot in your future composition, especially when you try creating melodies. It will seem a lot more natural. It can be something very simple. For example, improvising over music that you like. If you're using an instrument, you can even add some effects if you want more fun and have a microphone, depending on the instrument you use. If you want to do it on the computer, Start with some ambient pads and add more and more things as you go, playing with this and exploring your VSTs in the process.
Blue Note's definitely right. When I started composing, I was mostly an orchestra musician, and I nearly never improvised. Practicing improvisation made the composition a lot easier to me. But Princess Cadence is still waiting, so let's get back to the piece. Usually, a music is either made of a melody, on which chords are written, or a chord progression, on which a melody is written. So, in our case, we need to find chords that work with the melody. Here is the harmonized version of the piece. Don't be afraid if at this point it sounds sad. That's mostly because of the solo piano, which usually sound very sad. Keep in mind the spirit that you wanted for the music at the beginning and work on the chords. But how can you do this? Well, this is a wide subject, but here is the very basics of it. Let's imagine that your melody starts with a F. Usually, basic chords are made of 3 notes, and called triads. And they are made of stacking thirds. Thirds are easy to spot on a piano keyboard. Since our melody starts with F, let's call the F key 1. Then G is 2 and A is 3. 3, third. Yep, that's it. You got your upward third. Doing the same process, you find that the downward third is D, and so this is the first possible chord to fit with this note. You can also try to move the F in the chord, for example like this, or this. And, more importantly, you have to experiment. Move the chords around. Create tensions by taking the melody note out of the chord. Release it by getting in the chord again. And finally, remember that in music, nothing is intrinsically impossible. The ugliest chord when played alone can be the chord you need in some situation and sound amazing if well bringed. This is how you get an harmonized version of your piece. You then need to orchestrate it, that is, giving the different parts to different instruments. I decided to give the melody to a flute in the same way it was used in the Princess Zelda theme. But I wanted to add the fact that Princess Cadence is a princess of the Crystal Kingdom, and she comes from the north, which is why I decided to use an Irish flute for the melody. Then I gave the brass interventions, like John Williams did in Sound the Bell or Daniel Ingram in This Day Aria. I wanted the music to feel majestic, and so that I used string pads for the harmony, giving exactly the chord progression that I played on the piano to the strings. This was mostly inspired by the Princess Mononoke main theme. The high percussion were used both by John Williams and Daniel Ingram, and I like the sound of the glockenspiel a lot. So I gave a few notes of the melody to this instrument, and it comes to support the flute on some notes. Finally, if you want to give a formal or epic feeling to the music, you can use percussions, and this is why I added low drums, a gong and a cymbal to the music. Now, you might think that you're done and that the piece is ready for Princess Cadence, but you'd be terribly wrong. Music is to me the language of emotion, and there is no emotion in music without playing with what is called expressivity. In VST instruments, this refers to the volume and the speed of the bow for strings or the blowing speed for winds. Let's listen to a version of the piece with only the strings and brass, without expressivity. Now let's add the expressivity. Listen to how the brass sound changes with the volume, and to the feeling the volume changes themselves bring to the music. You now know why working on the expressivity of your compositions is important, especially when working with virtual instruments, since they mechanically play what you ask them to. Now we are really done composing, and we can listen to the final version. And it seems that Princess Cadence is pretty happy of it, so I'm happy too.
This video is now over, but I would like to add some last words before the end. Remember to stay critical, but don't be too harsh on yourself, something I do a lot. The key to improvement is not having too much negativity or positivity. It's having both of them in the right place.
Short notes too. In the same way they would be played to introduce a king somewhere, or for example a princess. No, avec ramp. Ne pas qu'un peu feu. I am princess that ne couldn't cramp. This kind of soft percussion, tell me no. This kind of soft soft. This kind of soft This kind of soft percussion tally with the idea of a princess. Very quiet, calm and relaxing. There is only a sort of electronic flute, discrete string pads and a harp. Listen kid, if you want to record things, try not to laugh. Oh, so the flute refers to Link and his ocarina, but it can also be considered that it can also The flute refers to Link and his ocarina, but it can also be Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid if at this point it's there. Don't be afraid. You now know why working on the expressivity of your compositions is important, especially when working with visual instruments, since they mechanically play what you ask them to.